Good evening. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Present.
Here.
Councilmember Honsack.
Present.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Here.
Councilmember Wesselek.
Here.
Mayor Searcy.
Here. Good evening, everyone. There are no changes to the agenda. In terms of tonight's agenda, we have two presentations. The first is the Sustainable Maryland Committee Annual Work Plan, followed by the Library Construction Project update. We have a voting session, which consists of the consent agenda, which includes resolutions making appointments to various boards and committees and commissions. We then have two work sessions this evening. The first is the budget amendment number 3. And the second is process for restricting parking at properties with limited frontage. In terms of upcoming agendas, on Wednesday, March the 12th, the council will meet at its normal time of 7:30. We will start with a legislative update. I apologize. We have a legislative update on the agenda for tonight as well. But on March the 12th, we will have a legislative update. We then will have two presentations. The first is the city manager's overview of recommended FY26 budget. And then the second is department budget presentations, part 1, city manager's office, information technology, human services, ARPA, finance, city clerk, and communications. We'll then have 3 voting items. The first is the first reading ordinance approving the FY25 budget amendment number 3. The second is the first reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code 13.20.040A9, parking or standing in prohibited areas. And the third item is a resolution adopting the 2025-2026 City Council priorities. In terms of the work session, we will have 2 work sessions that evening. The first is modifications of the guidelines for the Community Quality of Life Grant Program, and the second is eligible uses of Community Development Block Grant Funds. On Wednesday, March the 19th, the City Council will meet at 7:30. That evening, we will have a legislative update, and then we will have 2 presentations. The first is the department budget presentations, part 2, and that consists of Public Works Department and Stormwater, Housing and Community Development Department, as well as the library. The second is recommendations for FY26 sidewalk and traffic calming projects. We also have 2 voting items that evening. The first is the second reading ordinance approving FY25 budget amendment number 3. And then the second item is the first reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code 13. Wait a minute, I just want to make sure. Oh, this should be the second reading ordinance amending Tacoma Park Code 132004A9, parking or standing prohibited areas. And then we have the consent agenda resolution repealing resolution 2016-16 regarding eligible uses of community development block grant funds. And then the second is a resolution revising the guidelines for the Community Quality of Life Grant Program. And then I'll just go through this next one. Wednesday, March the 22nd, the City Council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. We will have a public hearing. It will be the first public hearing on the FY26 budget, followed by a legislative update, and then we will have presentations. The first is a quarterly financial report, FY25 second quarter. And then the second presentation that evening is department
Recording
budget
in
presentations, part
progress.
3, Police Department and Recreation Department. Okay, and so with that, we're going to move to our legislative update. We are joined by Ann Seacott, who is our lobbyist in Annapolis, to provide us with an update on all of the fun things that are happening in Annapolis.
Fun is in quotes, right?
Did you not hear the sarcasm, Ann?
Oh, I'm sorry. It wasn't coming through real good. Yeah. We're almost 2/3 of the way through session. We are at the time where 2 things are happening. there's a shift at this time of session every year, where most of the bill hearings are wrapped up. There are a few more the early part of next week. The House and the Senate do a lot more work on the floor as a full body, the Senate and the House, debating bills, passing bills, all in the race to beat what's called the crossover deadline on March 17th. Anybody that wants the civics lesson, I'm happy to provide it. But the short of it is that's when House bills have to be in the Senate, Senate bills have to be in the House. So that's going on. The other big thing that's going on right now is the continuation of the budget process. We are finished with the budget hearings for the operating budget. There's still some hearings going on with the capital budget, and the decisions are starting to be made. And it's a long process where the House this year, the House has the budget first. They alternate every year. They're starting to make some of their decisions, and that will happen over the course of the next couple of weeks. And then the budget bill will pass over to the Senate, and the Senate will then make its decisions, and then they make decisions in a conference committee on all the differences. The budget picture, as we've talked about throughout this session, is not good. And there are problems and concerns about what's still to come based on federal government, the administration's actions. So there are also a lot of tax proposals being discussed. And there's just a lot that's going to happen in these last 35 days of session before we end with a balanced budget. And that is right now the goal of the legislature is to end by April 7th with a balanced budget and deal with potential future problems with the budget because of future federal actions at a later time, perhaps in a special session later this year. So that's the budget picture. And on the legislative front, as things have slowed down, there were just a couple of bills that we've weighed in on, supporting a House joint resolution related to the use of nuclear weapons, and then also a bill to look at creating better deterrence by increasing some criminal penalties at the municipal level. And with that, that's all the kind of new stuff, and that's the context of where we are right now in session.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne. Are there any questions for Anne before I jump in?
One quick
Councilmember Landon?
Hi, just a quick question. Is my mic on? Yeah, about the request that we had made for the 500,000. Can you hear me okay, Ann?
Just you were breaking up just a little bit.
Yeah. The request that Tacoma Park had made for the $500,000 for the development planning grant. Can you remind us the status of that and the dollar number pending right now? Thank you.
Yes. So that request went in, and just trying to pull it up for purposes of making sure I'm giving you the correct number. And it is so the request did not go in for 500,000. The request went in for $263,000. So I think when we talked about 500,000, like at the end of the calendar year, I think that was kind of a placeholder number.
And it's still alive, not dead yet, as they say.
That is correct. You know, I will say with the capital budget, the constraints aren't nearly as great, but it is still significant. There's a lot of legislators talking about how each district is going to get much less money than they're used to getting specifically for these legislative bond initiatives. So, you know, everybody's sort of saying, we'll put it in, but so, you know, I think it's figuring that it's quite likely that we won't get the whole thing. And there's always a chance we get nothing, but I know the D20 team works really hard to try to help with getting some of the state dollars to help with the capital projects.
Right. And Anne, I know that one of the things that we have heard from D20 time and time again is the fact that we are putting in requests that are not from the outside stakeholders viewed as being exorbitant. So in the past, when we've put forward requests for 200,000, 250,000, those appear to be a little bit more reasonable in terms of capital ask than some other municipalities who take a chance of asking for millions of dollars or some multiplier.
That's correct.
And while we are talking about the public works bond request, it might be helpful if the city manager's office could just remind us and the public about what the purpose of those funds would be for. Just because I know that there are some questions or concerns about why it is that we are asking for these resources. And I do think it might be really helpful to just remind folks what the purpose of those funds are for.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is this on?
Nope, I don't think so. Let's get the city manager's mic on. Okay,
Thank you. Better?
better.
Yes, thank you for the question. Mayor and Council, City in early January submitted a request for $263,000 legislative bond initiative request with respect to the purpose would be for some design, concept exploration and design related to what would be phase 2 of a project that was initiated back in 2011 at the City of Tacoma Park's Public Works facility. What happened at that time was phase 1 addressed several of the buildings there for our Public Works employees to make them more updated, functional, safe, environmentally correct. And there was envisioned at the time a phase 2. The city has not yet gotten to that from 15 years ago. So the thought was to revisit an exploration of what needs to be done. Clearly, some of that is readily apparent, certainly to Director Braithwaite and her employees. It's apparent to me that there are some deficiencies there, including a fleet maintenance bay that is too small and outdated. Employees frequently can't get the larger vehicles in, and they have to work outside in the elements. We also don't have a restroom on that particular building. There's a porta potty at the end. We don't have appropriate storage of materials, commodities, and HVAC is an issue. When it gets hot in the summer and cold in the winter, it's not really operating as it should. So the thought was to see if we can get some outside money. The legislative bond initiative would be necessary to retain a professional consultant to do that design work. And then ultimately we'll be at a decision point. Mayor and council would eventually determine whether there is enough merit derived from that investigation to direct staff to design a project. We should have some better ability to have estimated costs for any construction improvements, whether it's a renovation or replacement. That's one of the things that's a question mark. It might just be a renovation, but the purpose of the funds for right now is, again, to use outside funds to do a design of this phase 2, which was envisioned as far back as 2011.
Thank you very much. And I know, Anne, you had mentioned the ever-changing landscape of the state budget. And I guess one of the things that I have been considering is whether or not this may be the one period where there's a real possibility for capital funds, whereas as folks move forward with the current administration federally, when we're talking about the FY27 budget, are we, is there a real possibility that these types of funds may draw up, at least in the short term, in future state budgets? And so now is the time, if we have something that's viable that our D20 is able to get through, that we should really try to seek out. Otherwise, I could imagine those funds over time being a little bit more difficult to get. And I don't know if you're hearing, based on some of the budget things that are happening right now, whether or not that may be happening sooner rather than the next fiscal year, right?
Perhaps. Yeah, nobody's looking forward to the next the rest of the year in terms of what still could happen with the budget. So there are ways that they can kind of use some capital dollars to replace other dollars, and that sometimes cuts into the availability of some of the capital dollars that are usually available for these kinds of projects, and that is just still current year. So I don't know if people are looking too hard at next year. I think people are worried about getting through this year.
Yeah, thank you so much. And another thing that has been, I know that because we're hitting that March 17th deadline, there's just been a lot of discussion. I know there's a lot of movement that's happening on some bills that we have been following. Good cause and the stop sign cameras, and just trying to see what lives and what makes its way to the 17th. So I appreciate your continued attention to some of our legislative priorities and tracking and seeing how they advance over the next week, because I know we're in crunch time.
Yeah.
Council Member Schlegel.
Thank you. Very briefly, is the request for the 263,000, is that a request for a grant or for bond authorization so that we would take out a bond and gradually pay it off?
That's a very common question, and it's a common misunderstanding. It is a grant to the city. It is called a legislative bond initiative, but it is grant money to the states dealing with the bond issues, but it's a grant that comes to the municipality.
Thank you so much.
Great. Awesome. Seeing no more questions, Anne, thank you so much. And I may see you in Annapolis tomorrow.
Yes, that'll be excellent. Thank you. I'll see you next week.
Wonderful, wonderful. Excellent. Have a good one. Okay, we're going to move on to our next item for this evening. Next we have public comments on voting items. And just as a reminder, the only voting item we have this tonight is the consent agenda, making appointments to the Commission on Landlord Tenant Affairs, Ethics Commission, Grants Review Committee, Sustainable Maryland Committee, Tree Commission, and Board of Elections. Do we have any public comments on voting items? Okay. City Clerk, do we have any virtual comments on voting items this evening? Wonderful. Do we have any general public comments this evening? Come on down.
Hello.
Hold on 1 second. Let's make sure. Okay.
Okay. I'm Heather Hahn, and I am here speaking in favor of the proposed parking restrictions in front of stairs or walkways that abut the curb and are the only way in or out of a property. I live in one of those properties, and so do neighbors on my whole street, on my side of the street. So I think this is a common sense rule. When there's someone parked in front of the only way out of your house, it's really hard to get out of your house. And it's also hard for the mail carriers to deliver or other deliveries to be made. And in the case of an emergency, then it would be a real problem, not being able to access the house. I think when people do park in front of our stairs, I think they just don't notice or think about that, oh, someone wouldn't be able to get in. So having this be a regulation where we could then have the curb painted to say no parking here would just be that visual reminder for someone that they shouldn't park there. And then, of course, being able to enforce that if it were a problem would be would be useful. But I think having the paint that would the rule would allow would be the key to solving that problem.
Okay.
So that's all. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening? Do we have any general public comments, virtual comments this evening?
We had one person signed up, but I don't see her on the call.
Okay. All right. So we will keep moving. Do we have any council comments this evening? Council member Gibson.
Gibson. Thanks, man.
I'm sorry, Gilbert. My goodness, I didn't even realize sorry.
I can be him too.
GI.
GIL. Last week we had the mayor and I had the opportunity to sit in on a meeting with the Maryland Housing Partnership, MHP. Very informative meeting. I was very pleased with what we learned. They own the property, that is 7667 Maple Avenue, the Parkview Towers. It's an 11-story building that has appeared to be under construction for the past 6-7 years, since 2018, I believe. Apparently the facade had cracked and is pulling away from the building. So the building was deemed livable, but they had to vacate some units there. So pleased to know that they're going to be hopefully starting construction soon when they finalize their financials with their partners. And we're looking at probably a 14 to 16 month project. But hopefully we'll have that done within a year or so and have some happy families living in that building that has about 4 units short right now and 4 others that have lost bedrooms, et cetera. So just want to let residents know there'll be some noise and there'll be some dust for the next 14, 16 months. So be patient with the project. And yeah, very pleased to know that that building's going to be able to be preserved. Oh, one other thing, a shout out to the police department. We had a tree down across Maple Avenue last Friday because of the heavy winds. Pretty large tree limb that kept the roads closed for a while, crushed one of my neighbor's cars. I'm very sad about that, but kudos to the officers who went above and beyond to pull that big limb off the roadway. I don't know if they got tired of waiting for whatever entity that was coming or decided they need to get back in service, but it was a pretty big limb. Pretty big task. Looks like somebody's been lifting weights, and that's always good. So kudos to the police department for going above and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Councilmember Hanzak.
Thank you, Mayor. That is really exciting news. I had not heard that yet. That's just thrilling. Can I just clarify? Am I allowed to ask a question of my fellow councilman?
If you can do it within 3 minutes.
Okay. Who are they getting financing from? Do we know that?
The financial partners. Mayor, you sat in. Did you take note of that?
No, they did not.
They didn't say. Yeah.
Anyway, that's a really huge step forward. That's wonderful. Okay, so just a couple things, 3 things. One is last week I had the pleasure of attending 2 meetings on the same night. Didn't really get to attend both of them in full, but there was a MC.DOT hosted session for people to view the proposed sidewalks that are within a half-mile radius of the Purple Line stations on the county side. I would encourage anybody who has interest in that, especially looking at David Reed out there. It's just north of your neighborhood, and of course Cindy DeBala, and also folks in Ward 5 for sure, to take a look at some of those drawings and see if you have any inputs to give them. I don't have the website in front of me, but I'm sure you can find it on MC.DOT or email me. Also, that night, I spent most of my time at the Enough meeting hosted by the various partners of that group. It was a packed gym of people from all across our community, really, really neat, diverse crowd. And I just wanted to share a few highlights for me. we got into small groups, and the focus of the Enough grant is on children across our community and the census tracts where there are some of our highest needs in and around our community, which includes sort of some of the areas closest to Ward 5 and that are also zoned to Rolling Terrace. And I would say that I think one of the things that left a deep impression on me was that across the whole group, even when everybody was divided into small groups, there was a lot of discussion around recreation and needs in our city, and the complexities that lie within. I don't want to try to summarize it in too short of terms, but people were talking about some of the things we're often hearing. But I think the thing that really stood out to me was the idea that people really, really need more indoor recreational opportunities, especially in the places where we don't have as much green space accessible, and that's close to where the parents and guardians are able to feel safe about where their children are at any given time, which gets back to our needs to focus on our own recreation center and also our offerings. And I'm looking forward to our building being filled up. And then finally, I just wanted to share anecdotally, I had some really deep conversations with some immigrants in our community at the food pantry, just sharing with colleagues and residents. In short, they specifically said that they are seeing a lot fewer residents at the food pantry. 15 of the households were not comfortable coming out for food. That was really telling to me and disturbing. They also said that they are seeing fewer people are going to seek health services, and that's become notable to them. And also they have a lot of siblings and family members who are working at like Mega Mart and Best Way. And they said that anecdotally, they feel like the markets are a lot more empty of people, and even workers are sometimes not showing up. So I just wanted to share those, that anecdotal feedback. There were probably 10 people engaged. Most of the dialogue was in Spanish, but so these were Spanish speakers in our community. But there were people in this group also who had not gone the full step to get guardianship for their children, which gave me concern as well. So I just wanted to give you that information.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Dabala.
Good evening, everybody. Couple things. It's budget season. And so tomorrow night, Thursday, and next Thursday, I'll be doing virtual conversations with anybody who wants to sign in from Ward 2. This week, 7 o'clock, next week, 8 o'clock, hopefully after kitty bedtime. And then as the weather gets better, we'll be doing some in person, maybe even outside. But I want to let people know that. And the other thing is that I'll be representing the city next week at the National League of Cities Conference, which is their annual legislative conference. It's here in Washington, D.C., so I get to go back and forth a lot. And Governor Moore will be speaking Monday afternoon. And the most important thing, this being a critical time to be visible on the Hill, I will be having the opportunity to go up on Wednesday with a group of NLC folks. And if there are points that the city manager or any of the council members want made to your representatives, let me know. And for the conference generally, if there are questions or things you want to be highlighted as I'm there, talking with other communities and talking with all the different speakers, do let me know again, offline, so that I can be representing our views, because it's that kind of conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dabala, and for your participation and leadership on NLC. Councilmember Landman.
Thank you. Briefly, first I want to give a shout out to the Village of Tacoma Park for their very helpful work with one of my neighbors and constituents who highlighted for me once again how important it is to have their help with home repairs. They're skilled people and they're kind people working with their neighbors in Tacoma Park. So thank you, Village of Tacoma Park, for what you do. And speaking of fixing things, I just wanted to remind everyone that the Fix It Clinic that is sponsored by the Friends of the Library will be held again on March 9th. That's this coming Sunday at the library from 12:30 to 2:30. Bring your broken stuff. If possible, register ahead of time on the Friends of the Tacoma Park Library website so people who are there to repair things will bring the right equipment to help you with your little appliances or your clothing that needs sewing and repairing, that kind of thing. And my last comment is to thank the citizens and residents of Tacoma Park who are part of the community budget group that held a very interesting and well-attended budget forum this past weekend. I saw at least one or two of the council members and the mayor were there to listen in, and we heard a lot of interest from the community in what's happening with the budget, and it's clear that there are a lot of people who have thoughts on that. So thank you to those who organized it. It was very informative, and to all the people who attended and spoke and shared with us what their concerns are. It helps us, I think, to do our job better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Councilmember Slagle.
Thank you, Mayor Searcy. I will be walking the ward this weekend, so no formal office hours, but I'll start from the north and walk all the way through and try to sneak around in the wider middle part. So I hope to run into some people and just to get my eyes on particulars that I've heard about on streets, including disturbing news that there are a couple of houses up for auction, one on Manor Circle and one on, I believe it's Lincoln, and concerns that residents are expressing about their neighbors who've lost their jobs and may not be able to pay their mortgages. On Eastern Avenue, we have some exciting news, which is that it seems like we have a bona fide strong contact in Cornelius Anderson, who's the DDOT community engagement specialist for Ward 4. And he has informed me that the designs that were produced in 2022 are up for revision this spring. So thanks to the folks who've already responded to my request for help with kind of a working group to track that. And I'll keep trying to grow that group out, and then we'll have a meeting just so residents are clear on what's going on and what they might want to advocate for. There were certainly 3 very compelling and informative meetings that went on this week, but I'll mention 2 of them. One was Victory Tower, and thank you to you, Mayor Searcy, for coming out. We heard from 60 to 65 residents who ostensibly were there to talk about safety and security concerns in the building, but it really turned out to be a great opportunity for them to have the building management company listen to their concerns about a lot of operational protocol things. And so it was the start of a great dialogue. They've been promised quarterly meetings. I'll be there every Thursday, every second Thursday of the month at 4 p.m. to hang out. And I encourage neighbors of Victory Tower to also come out and get to know that neighborhood of our ward. The other meeting I wanted to mention was, of course, the community budget forum that Councilmember Landman mentioned, and I did count, again, 60 to 65 residents there. One of them took the time to write back to me and lives in Ward 3 between Jackson and Carroll. And she just wanted to point out that our budgeting has been based on decades of normalcy, and we are facing as a country massive changes that will affect us all, especially those here in DC and Maryland. And this budget does not reflect this era of crisis change, families losing their jobs, landing in an oversaturated pool of people looking for new jobs, and they find themselves selling their homes, saturating the housing market, which will lead to a downturn, et cetera, et cetera. So it was kind of every day we're getting a wake-up call, but it was some really wise thinking there about how we're gradually realizing how normalcy is kind of out the window for the foreseeable future. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Slagle. Councilmember Wesselek.
Thank you. Well, and on that note, I'm eager to break into the very recently debuted budget for fiscal year 26. I think it was just completed and shared this afternoon. So thank you to the city manager and all the staff who worked really hard on that. A couple things. I had my first town hall with Ward 6 residents on Monday night. It was online. Good handful of folks turned out. So thank you to those that did. I intend to do more of those, particularly probably one in the near future, specifically about the budget process. But I wanted to say thank you and look forward to doing that again. This past weekend, Mayor Searcy and I were both at the ribbon cutting for the Tacoma Langley Crossroads One Stop Center. And I just want to make sure folks know about it because it's a really, really great resource. It is a storefront that is in the same shopping center that our satellite library is in right now on New Hampshire Avenue, but beyond the building where the library is, there's more shops and offices back there. It is a storefront, but you can go there, have an intake, and they can help you with a whole wide variety of social services. So if folks are in need of food, health services, employment, coaching, all sorts of things, it is literally a one-stop center to help with that. So you can call and make an appointment and then do an intake, and they can help you out with a lot of things. So it was really great to be at that event. And lastly, I want to share an event that's happening tomorrow night. It is the second of a series of virtual events that are going to be hosted online, primarily by the Montgomery County Council President Kate Stewart. It's called United in Service and Support. Tomorrow night's online meeting will start at 7:30. It is going to focus on mental health resources for county residents. Congressman Jamie Raskin will be there to speak with folks, as well as experts from the County Department of Health and Human Services, MoCo Pride, Every Mind, and the Black Physicians and Healthcare Network. So I'm hoping to stop in while I can, but look for that. It looks like it could be a great event, and it's the second of several that I think are on upcoming Thursday evenings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. I want to, one of the joys of going last is you don't have to repeat yourself, because I was a lot of places this weekend. But one place that was not discussed was the Tacoma Park Middle School PTA Book Fair. So that was a great chance to go in and grab some additional paperbacks. So thank you so much to the organizers of that event. It was super fun. I also was able to pick up a plant. And I think I saw Councilmember Landman there too. So thank you all so much for supporting our local schools. And ditto in terms of my colleagues around appreciation for the Victory Towers tenants, but also property management and our staff, HCD and the police department that was there talking to residents. Special shout out to, again, HCD for working with us as we were handing out food also during the Tacoma Langley Park One Stop Shop ribbon cutting. So, and had a chance to engage with a couple of county council members. Council President Stewart was there. Councilmember Lukey was there. So that was a wonderful opportunity as well. And definitely want to thank the organizers of the budget session. It was really, it's always helpful to make sure that we have these open forums to be able to hear the concerns and to try to work collaboratively on ways in which we can address them. So thank you to the organizers of that. This week, there's a lot going on. So I want to thank our city staff, particularly Ryan, our communications person. I released 2 blog posts this week. One is a follow-up regarding immigration resources that are now available on the city's website. Our goal really is, we know that the landscape is ever changing. And so what we really want to make sure that we're doing as a city is providing folks with a one-stop kind of page that can kind of have a lot of the different resources that are available. And so I do want to thank our staff that have been working tirelessly to get those pages together. And that blog post also also highlights the work that we're doing within our city with our staff to make sure that staff are trained and prepared in the, you know, possibility that there is some interface with ICE that has to happen by city staff. So I want to thank everyone that worked on all of that work. I also issued a blog as it relates to the federal workforce and what resources are available. I want to encourage all of my colleagues in the federal government to please take a look at that blog. We tried to identify some resources that are not just limited to unemployment, but also just things that you all may want to consider as you are preparing in an unfortunate event that you are rift, and just trying to share a couple of tidbits that I found very useful, and reminding folks things like your location for your unemployment is based on where you work, not where you live. And so for many, looking at those SF50s and confirming the official duty station on those SF50s are really important, because it gives you an idea of where your actual duty station is and which state you would ultimately need to apply for unemployment. The city has also developed a resource page where we've linked all of the federal resource pages for DC, Virginia, Maryland, and also resources from the Montgomery County. Lastly, I want to thank our MML chapter for continuing to work towards engaging our county staff. We met this morning, Councilmember DeBala and I, along with other leaders and municipalities across the county, with our county staff to just, again, talk more about what's happening as it relates to ICE, what is happening as it relates to the federal workforce and things that we should consider at a municipal level. So I appreciate our MML chapter for keeping those regular meetings on the books. I believe we're going to be meeting every other, maybe like every other week. Yeah, just an early morning, every other week kind of call, just so that we know what's happening in the county and any data that they may have available as it relates to impacts of the current administration on immigration, the federal workforce, as well as grants and federal grants and resources that may be made available. And so with that, I think that's all I got. I will turn things over to Councilmember Hanzak. Go right ahead.
Sorry, I forgot one announcement. On Monday of this coming week from 7 to 8:30 at Essex House, I will be co-hosting what we're calling a networking and resources meeting for residents. Unfortunately, it's not open to others, but I do want to acknowledge and thank Meals on Wheels. They're going to be coming out and joining us, and also the Village came out and brought us materials, and we'll also be sharing information about the, also HCD will be joining us, Mariama, so thank you to HCD for agreeing to do that, and we'll be giving out information about immigration, as well as federal government resources, as well as rental rebate information. So all around, just trying to get information to residents. We have not had a meeting in that building for many, many, many months. And so I'm delighted that this is coming to fruition.
Excellent. Oh, and while I forgot some things too. Thank you to Councilmember DeBala for working with me on the testimony that was given on Tuesday on the Montgomery County tax credit bill for the tax credit program 325. And I will also be in Annapolis through the remainder of the week, heading down after this meeting to attend the Maryland Mayors Association Conference, which will start at 8 a.m. tomorrow with the Advocacy Day. So definitely looking forward to learning about what is happening in the state from a mayoral perspective, but also being able to advocate on behalf of the city. And so with that, I will officially, for real this time, turn things over to our city manager for city manager comments.
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
Okay. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council and our guests this evening. As Councilmember Waslick offered the spoiler,
Sorry.
that's quite all right. You do it better than me. The FY26 proposed budget is now posted on the city website, along with the budget calendar for going forward. Our budget development season is officially and formally underway. Within that, there's a city manager message, budget message that's contained. It serves as a bit of a summary. So I can draw attention to that. We also have a budget at a glance section, but you're welcome to read the hundreds of pages of document at your leisure, and we'll certainly stand by for questions and ultimately the meetings that will be coming. We're also, the city manager's budget message will also be published in the Tacoma Park City's newsletter, which is coming out. It's a little bit late, like last year, in order to contain the budget information versus missing the whole month. But that should be out fairly soon. And I will also be addressing this proposed budget at on agenda at next Wednesday's Mayor Council meeting, 12. As well as us beginning to provide some presentations in the first wave of departments' budget proposals that we'll be presenting over a number of different dates in the coming month here. From the Recreation Department, spring and summer class registration starts March 10th for scholarship recipients, March 17th for residents, and March 24th for non-residents. Information regarding registration for classes and programs are on the website, or you may stop by the community or recreation center. Camp registration began February 19th, and as of today, more than half of Tacoma Park summer camps are completely full. Information regarding registration for summer camps are on the website, or you can stop by the community or recreation center. And the Recreation Department's basketball spring break camp is full. However, there are a few spaces left in the Maple Avenue and teen spring break camps. Information regarding registration for spring break camps are on the website, or again, you may stop by the community or recreation center. Finally, from the Recreation Department, save the date for the city's annual egg hunt. The egg hunt will take place on Saturday, April 19th from 10 a.m. at the Ed Wilhelm Field behind Piney Branch Elementary School. The event is free and I've got to say this, exciting time for residents of all ages. That's the last time I'm going to say that.
It's
There
not
will
going to
be
be the
games,
last time.
crafts, and egg hunts, and special visit from the Easter Bunny. 10 a.m. From the library, this spring, the library is partnering with the University of Maryland Student Association to offer Meducate, a workshop series for school-aged youth. The first session is Healthy Eating, Nutrition Essentials on Saturday, March 29th at 1 p.m. We will also offer sessions on debunking nutrition myths and how the brain functions when we read. And join our youth services librarian, Dave Burbank, for a new monthly program called Alternative Games. Designers will debut games for playtesting, and we will have Dungeons and Dragons and similar role-playing games, and we will roll out a cart full of tabletop games for folks to play and enjoy. The next session of Alternative Games will be held on Sunday, March 30th from 3 to 5 p.m. Housing and Community Development Department, Eastern Standard Time will blast off with their funky rhythms in a lively, boundary-busting show blending soul, funk, jazz, reggae, and ska in a Caribbean beat hot pot. The performance will begin at 7:30 p.m. at the Community Center this Friday, March 7th, and it's free. From the Police Department, please join us for Coffee with a Cop on this coming Monday, March 17th at Starbucks, 7690 New Hampshire Avenue in Tacoma Park, from 10 a.m. to noon. Connect with your local officers over a cup of joe, and let's build bridges and strengthen our community. And from the City Manager's Office, a shout out from the Housing and Community Development Department. A shout out to Brendan Smith, our Arts and Humanities Coordinator, for securing a Maryland State Arts Grant of $21,000 to refurbish and repair the city's azalea statue. The grants will help the city renovate a unique entry sign to our city. We appreciate his work to help bring color and art to our residents. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the Police Department's Community Police Academy. Last evening, I had the pleasure of attending the inaugural session of the Community Police Academy along with Councilmember Landman and Councilmember Wasblick. I'd like to give huge credit to Kathy Plevy for all of her work in putting this together. She worked very, very hard. It was extremely well organized. And frankly, this is a 12-week program, so there's a lot to coordinate. But for our residents, I had an opportunity to meet 8 residents last evening who are also, in addition to our 2 council members, participating in this 12-week program, which concludes on May 20th. They'll be covering such topics over the course of these 12 weeks as communications, emergency management, DUI, criminal law and investigations, use of force, tasers, firearms, victim witness domestic violence and mental health, crime analysis, traffic laws, bike law, speed and red light camera programs, patrol procedures and de-escalation techniques, active assailant, and community policing and media relations. Quite a swath of topics presented by our police department with different speakers on the different dates. Again, I commend these residents for their commitment to this community and to their own education. We offer this, the city has offered this for years, and we wanted to make sure that the community continues to know about this program so that in future years we continue to get high participation rate from residents. So once again, thank you, Kathy, for all the hard work that you and your team have done to provide this opportunity to the community. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. And I apologize to Ms. Machui. We didn't have you online earlier, so we want to make sure that we provide you with an opportunity to comment. Ms. Machui, are you with us?
She's coming.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Machui, can you hear us now?
Ms. Machui, you're muted.
You?
We
There you
can,
go.
yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. I'm a resident of Ward 2. I've lived in Tacoma Park since 1983. My son was born here. He's getting no assistance. I begged and begged for 20 years to get help from the Developmental Disabilities Administration. He's got no help at all. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And I started Parents of Special Needs Adults in 2015. But now most of the people in the, I hate to almost say that I started it because I'm not in good shape. Most of the other people in the group are in better shape than we are. And I'm wondering if it's because my son is Black that you treat him that badly and we're poor? Are those the 2 reasons? The other people I know, they're not millionaires, but they have a lot more money than me and they have all white children or grown children and they're getting help. Is that the reason? I'm sorry. I'm just trying to find why. I guess if I had a lot of money, then you'd help. It's money. I'm sorry. I don't like Trump and I don't like the Republicans, but I don't like the way Democrats have treated my son for the 20 years. There's no excuse. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Machui. Okay, we're going to move on to our presentations this evening. The first is our Sustainable Maryland Committee's annual work plan.
All right, hello. Dear Mayor, council members, city staff. First up, thank you for excellent updates or excellent updates. And thank you so much for allowing us to present to you tonight on the activities of the Sustainable Maryland Committee, also called the Green Team. My name is Emmanuel Wagner, and I'm the chair of the committee. I'm joined by Janet Owens, vice chair, and Melissa Klein, our secretary. And they will join me in just a few minutes. The purpose of this presentation is really to provide you with an update on the activities of our committee and to make ourselves available to any questions that you may have related to our goals and agenda. But during the presentation, we'll cover we'll cover the committee's purpose and mission. We'll also talk about our members. And we'll briefly discuss the city's framework that guides us, and then we'll discuss our current activities, as well as a look ahead to our 2025 and 26 goals. We'll conclude with a summary of actions for you to consider, especially now that we have arrived in budget season. But just step back. The Green Team. What do we do? Our our committee aims to work with the council and city staff to help meet our city's very ambitious climate goals and environmental goals. Specifically, we have three activities. First, keep our Sustainable Maryland certification current. And we were successful in achieving that last year by receiving a silver certification and being the 2024 Sustainability Champion, which means that we got the highest point mark of all applicants. And I think Dory already provided an update on that a while ago. Second, we seek to inform and educate the council and staff about climate change developments and sustainability issues and actions that are relevant to meeting our city's goal of net zero by 2035. And I will say that after hearing what the current issues are that you're dealing with, it seems like climate change is not necessarily on the top agenda, but it is something that will affect us over the next decades. So it's not something we should ignore, but I understand there's other pressing issues. And lastly, we assist the council and staff by identifying and helping to implement projects, advocating for funding, and educating residents on activities that they can take to help tackle emissions and prepare for the impacts of climate change. Here are our committee members. We have currently 8 members from 4 different wards. We have Chiara Atuyebi from Ward 6, Melissa Klein from Ward 2, Janet Owens from Ward 3, Raquel Richardo from Ward 4, Ian Reichert and Jeremy Schwartz from Ward 3, myself, and Sophie Yarrow from Ward 2. And we do have 1 vacant seat, which I believe we will cover and fill later this evening. Now, let me just step back really quick to provide you with the context in which we act, and that guides our thinking, because we have a lot of new council members and you may not be as aware of those issues yet. Tacoma Park has demonstrated commitment to climate change and sustainability for a really long time. The city developed a community GHG, greenhouse gas inventory, in 2000, very early on, and started to identify where emissions are coming from and which sectors to really focus our attention to. In 2014, it actually produced a 56-page report called the Sustainable Energy Action Plan. And it is my belief that one of our city council members was very active in developing that. That also outlined an array of specific actions that the council and residents can take to achieve our environmental goals. Previous councils have adopted 2 resolutions on climate change mitigation efforts, the 2019 Climate Emergency Resolution and the 2020 Climate Emergency Response Framework, which identified many actions to address climate change within the city. And we also operate in the context of Maryland's goal to reduce GHG emissions by 60% by 2031, which is not that far away from now, and the county's very, very ambitious goals of 80% reduction by 2027. As part of our sustainable Maryland certification, the committee is currently working on 4 different activities that we'll cover in more detail here today. We decided to focus on expanding food waste reduction programs, EV infrastructure expansion, municipal fleet electrification, and climate resilience. And I'm very happy to ask one of my colleagues up to cover some of these. Janet.
Good evening, everyone. I've been up here a couple of times to talk about food waste to the council. There's some new members, but just to say briefly, Tacoma Park has been involved in food waste collection since 2013 when it kicked off a pilot. It's been very successful. Since about 2015, the city has been collecting over 200 tons of food waste, aside from its other garbage collection. And last year, Public Works collected about 275 tons. Why is this important? Food waste collection results in fewer tonnage going to landfill trash, and it results in less methane emissions. Food waste is responsible for about 50% of methane emissions in landfill trash. Actually, the tonnage collected last year is equivalent to about 158 cars that would be taken off the road in terms of the greenhouse gas reduction. So while successful, the program participation varies significantly across income, ethnicity, demographics, and household type. In particular, the primary participants of this program are single-family households. Apartment dwellers or multifamily unit dwellers account for only 15% of the participation in food waste collection. So we see that there's clearly room to advance the program within Tacoma Park. And as a result of this divergence in participation, Public Works last year submitted a proposal to Sustainable Maryland to develop an innovative proposal to collect food waste from large multifamily unit buildings. This would follow programs that other cities in the metropolitan region are taking on. And that proposal was to Sustainable Maryland. It was for a grant for $20,000 to install smart compost bins that would be interactive with residents that would have access to those bins. But unfortunately, Public Works or the city was not successful in getting money from that grant program. So this is an area where we propose to add that to the budget. That's included in the budget that you have in front of you, $20,000. The staff, or as a committee, we've been involved in other efforts to try to launch food waste education. Food waste education is important for reducing methane gas emissions and the resources that that are lost when households throw away food that could have been eaten. In fact, it's equivalent to about $1,500 to $1,800 per household per year. And of course, we know about the environmental impacts. So we're trying to engage in education and small education activities that would alert residents to the impact of food waste altogether. That would also help residents see the need to compost their food waste. So that is why we encourage the council to set aside the $20,000 for this pilot. Thank you.
Right, and of course, the money that we would be saving by doing more education only increases as our tariffs hit and food gets more expensive. So our second goal here is to, which some of you have already heard in our last year's presentation, and actually the committee presented about this time last year, maybe it was January, on those two specific topics, food waste and EV infrastructure. So if you haven't seen those recordings, I invite you to take a look at that as we go into a lot more detail. But our second goal here is to expand our electric vehicle infrastructure, and that's because transportation sector is the highest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in the city. So it's an area that we should do more about. Aside, of course, reducing our reliance on on vehicles in general, meaning we walk or bike more, switching to electric vehicles is a great way to reduce our emissions in this sector. Residents in Tacoma Park actually have shown considerable willingness to adopt those vehicles, showcased by a tripling of the number of electric vehicles in the city over the last 4 years. But unfortunately, our public charging infrastructure has remained steady since 2018, when we last built out new charging infrastructure, which in this sector is almost like an eternity. So the city actually successfully applied for and received federal EV charging grants, partnering with Montgomery County. However, as you may be well aware of, with a funding freeze on federal dollars, these grant programs are more than in question, so we can't really say much to that. The committee remains to be focused on those two two things in this sector. First is developing an educational campaign about the availability of grant programs, rebates and tax incentives that residents and business owners can utilize to adopt EVs, and EVs become more widespread in the city. And we work with the Sustainability Office and the comms team to update the city website, provide those resources, and highlight these financial programs in like city newsletter articles and so forth. And the second is to develop a long-term roadmap and goals to actually support further EV adoption and identify potential policies that the council may be willing to consider to further advance these efforts. Our recommendation is the same recommendation that we proposed last year, which is set aside $50,000 in the budget cycle for potential match funds for EV infrastructure deployment. We were successful in including that in last year's budget. We didn't have the ability to actually spend it last year, but it would be very, very useful to continue to have those $50,000 as match funds available for potential infrastructure providers to actually come to the city and build this out. The third item is fairly related, and actually you did hear from ICF a few months ago on their report they did on a fleet transition plan to electrify the municipal vehicle fleet. The committee is working with Public Works and departments on that, and here we really have just two recommendations, and this is staff to have the appropriate time to actually dive into this transition plan, work through the transition planning effort, and understand the impact of these EV fleet transitions on their operations, because of course you have to change certain ways how you do things with EVs. And then second, to maybe consider creating a task force comprised of city residents with EV expertise to provide detailed insights into this market and potential help with these transition pathways. And with that, for our last slide on this, I'll ask Melissa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Let's pull it down.
Pull it down.
You could pull it, if you could pull it down a little bit. Perfect.
Thank you, everyone. The City Council has the priority of addressing climate resilience, and because of that, that got woven into our goals as well on the Sustainability Committee. And so it's a newer initiative for us in addressing it. And some of the actions we've taken so far are to bridge the sustainability committee with the emergency preparedness committee, because the emergency preparedness manager is also working on this. So we want to make sure we align and support in more of a streamlined way. So another thing we're doing just initially is developing content for the city's website on this topic, and that'll help establish some messaging that can be used in further outreach. So some of the other actions we'll do from there are some public education and engagement that's still in development for planning, and just also identifying funding and educational opportunities that we can get involved with. So, and then this slide is all about community connections, and we were very involved in different events taking place in DC and Tacoma Park, thanks to Doria Estrada, who's helped initiate all this. So local advocacy is essential in this administration. So the slide showcases our community connections to engage, educate, and drive action. And these pictures are from Earth Day events, Healthy Homes Fair, Tacoma Street Fair, and the sustainability tour, which was a huge success from which I learned so much just attending that too. So the next Earth Day event is coming up here in Tacoma Park on April 26th. So we will be reaching out to you to help promote that as well.
All right, almost there. So just a summary on our actual ask, since you've now heard what we do. We want you to consider two things. One is an allocation for all of these $20,000 to pilot a food waste collection program for multifamily homes, because as Janet has alluded to test that, and piloting that would then allow and give us data to further expand that, or get lessons learned, and then potentially further expand that beyond that initial pilot phase. And then the second one is really the reallocation of these $50,000 for EV charging infrastructure. Again, that funding would only be used if we actually find a way to get a developer to deploy that infrastructure. But it would be very useful for any project applicants to see that the city is interested and can provide match funding to do so. So with that, that's what we're currently engaged in, but I do want to sort of just do a little peek of what we're continuing to be to focus on, and that's the overview of our goals for 2025 and 26. And part of our Sustainable Maryland certification, we were actually asked to identify actions that are part of a 3-year plan. So we cover 2024. These are for 2025 and 26. The first one is really a review of the 2019 Climate Action Plan. And that's mainly because we're 6 years in. There was a pandemic in between. We have certainly federal uncertainty. So we feel like it may be valuable to evaluate the existing and proposed initiatives in that plan, compare them to our ongoing programs, and then by doing so, identify gaps where there may be that need to be addressed in order to reach our goals. But also because we went through the certification for Sustainable Maryland, we've learned about other programs that municipalities in the region are doing that we may not be active in. So that's basically a gap analysis, identifying additional programs that ideally don't cost us money or not much money. So we'll come back to the council probably with specific policy proposals to consider adoption of new programs or new policy measures. The second is a focus on renewable energy initiatives. Deploying renewable generation is actually quite a challenge in Maryland. We do not see enough new projects to come online to get us on a trajectory to achieve our very ambitious climate goals and renewable energy targets. And so as such, we'd like to help expand residential, municipal, commercial, like solar rooftop infrastructure by educating property owners. We would like to provide them with the tools to assess local power purchase agreements. So we incentivize additional generation projects in the region to create local jobs and local generation. We also are in a region where a pilot for a network geothermal heating system is going to be built, and working with the stakeholders to potentially bring that to Tacoma Park could be a way to reduce our reliance on natural gas heating. So those are all ways to advance renewable energy. The third is implementing recommendations of the task force on sustainable banking and investments. That was, I think, about 2 years ago. It was a task force that came to you with some recommendations. Really, all we're trying to do is make sure that those recommendations are considered and implemented. And so we would actually want to engage some of the former sustainable banking task force members in that effort, and help Tacoma Park to transition to a more sustainable banking system and bank, really, for that matter. The fourth goal is to conduct an energy efficiency assessment of the city's commercial properties. The county is actually currently developing a benchmark data for building energy performance standards, BEPS, and that creates a baseline to compare all commercial buildings to. And so the assessment for the buildings in our community could help the property owners to then identify low-cost actions that they can take to improve their building's energy efficiency, as well as identify available funding that may be, that they could access to make those upgrades that are identified in that program. And lastly, the final goal is very ambitious, but that has never stopped us before. And that's really to advocate before the Maryland legislature to allow municipalities to create financial disincentives for using fossil fuel, and use that revenue to fund clean energy programs. This could be a eco tax or a fossil fuel sales tax or some other revenue generating program, and that would then allow us to support low-income residents in making changes that help reduce their energy consumption and thus save them money. So that's quite ambitious, and many of these goals are still in the more conceptual phase than actual activities, but we're here to just give you an update of where our head is. So with that, we're at the end of our update here, and welcome questions and comments. And of course, we always invite you to attend our meetings to see how the sausage is made. And we do have some extra slides here that give you some more information, but I don't necessarily want to waste more of your time. You have a long agenda, but there's more.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of the work that the Sustainable Maryland Committee has been doing. I was so excited when we were #1 in the state. I mean, I cannot get over, because we had a year where we didn't quite meet the mark. And so to come back and be #1 is amazing. I do have one quick question for, and this may be for our Director of Public Works. In terms of the $20,000 for piloting multifamily housing composting, is that already incorporated as part of the current budget? It is, correct? Perfect. And then in terms of the reallocation of $50,000 for EV charging infrastructure, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on where we are with the federal grant on that. Are we just in a wait and see mode?
We had applied for 3. We had gotten word through Montgomery County that they were going to provide us a fast charger at the municipal building. At a meeting yesterday, we learned that may have evaporated. So very bad news. They're still waiting on the other 2. One was through MCEC and one was through COG. My guess is no news is probably bad news. And so it looks as if EV funding, which was some of the first to be hit in the transition, is off the table.
Okay. And so in terms of I want to make sure that I have an understanding from like our fiscal perspective, the reallocation of 50,000.
Yeah, we put 50,000 as in the sustainability budget in FY25. It's currently listed in the budget in FY26. A unique feature of the FY26 budget is most of the sustainability grant funding that typically was in the operating budget is now in the red light camera fund. And so the purpose of those funds could be matching funds, as Emmanuel alluded to. It could also be direct grants to a multifamily or commercial building to get them to install EV charging capacity at their parking lots.
Okay, great, thank you. Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, so this is great. Thank you for the trio presentation. That's kind of cool. And thank you for all the work that you all have done. It's pretty impressive. Again, coming back from not quite on the mark to number one. I had some questions about the proposals for the next few years, but I first had a question about the budget. Did I understand Director Braithwaite to say that the 50,000 is in the red light camera fund? Okay, thank you. So looking forward, I had a couple of, because I'm great with the proposals you've made. Looking forward to that slide that talks about the next couple of years, I had a couple of questions. I would have to find it first. Yeah, so thank you. The gap analysis, were you thinking that the committee would do that?
I think
Or
we
were
would.
you looking for some kind of staff support there?
Yeah,
I mean,
think
other
would-
than the obvious, which is there's got to be a little bit of help.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't think that we would be. I think we would work out in tandem with like a task force that would be made up from some committee staffers and volunteers from the committee. Sorry, not committee staff, city staff and volunteers from the committee.
All right, thank you.
And ideally also Montgomery County, since
Yeah,
it's their
fair.
program.
I hear you about the renewable energy initiatives. The sustainable banking and investments, I had a question for the city manager, because I believe that I have asked a very similar question and that the answer was forthcoming about where the city's at with, you're shaking your head, yes, so I'll just let you talk.
Yeah, I think trying to recall, I recall the question. I know that we were beginning to research some of that. I don't have a pat answer for that tonight. We can get back to them.
That'd be great, because
I think there were elements in there that we cannot do and some that we have done. That's my memory. But,
yeah, that was what I recalled from our
I-
conversation,
I'm
that we
not
might
sure
be
if,
further along than we necessarily had been informed that we were. So we need to fix that. And my third question had to do with the very last item. Did you have something else to say?
I just,
on
I'm
that
really
topic?
sorry, but I do want to keep us on on schedule
Okay, then I'll
tonight,
skip
and
the third one.
we have 4 more minutes for this discussion.
Yeah, never mind then. I've hogged my turn. know what-
Councilmember Landman?
I'll ask both my questions at once for efficiency's sake. The first one is if you could just tell us what a smart compost bin is, I would like to know. And then
And
secondly,
is it smarter than me?
yeah, is it smarter than Cindy? Then Councilmember DeBala, she wants to know that.
Actually, pretty cool.
Pardon?
It's pretty cool.
Okay, good. And then secondly, your interest in pursuing the electric vehicle issue further. In your collaboration with the staff, have you already talked about how this might relate to their study, planned study for this year about leasing of police vehicles, or is that something that's already on your radar? Thank you.
I am not aware of that yet, so I will coordinate with staff.
Don't forget the compost.
So briefly, the smart bins enable residents, they would have to have an access code or an app on their smartphone that would open the bin for them to deposit their food waste. The smart bin also would provide information to Public Works when that bin is full, so they could empty the bin. The idea is to really restrict what goes into the bin, that it's food waste and not other type of garbage. And this is these bins are being used in other programs, namely Arlington County, and there, I think, other cities or municipalities in Maryland that are also trying these smart bins out.
Councilmember Slagle?
Thank you. I appreciate the strategic plan, and the focus on leveraging city communications is really cool. I also appreciate and would love to amplify the idea of helping get the large building owners to get going with the BEPS. That's great. I had two quick questions. One is just a data question. So our 2031 goal is 60% reduction, and that's so different from our 2035 100% net zero. So is the 60% reduction for 2031, is that straight up reduction in greenhouse gases, or is that a net zero reduction?
My understanding is that 6% reduction of, and now I have to look up the baseline if that's 2005 levels or 2006 levels, but somewhere around there. But that's not net zero yet.
So it's not that, yeah, okay, got it. The other quick question was, when you're thinking about EV charging stations, are you focusing on multifamily? Because I am seeing lots of single family residences where the plugs are now reaching and people are making it work with slow charging overnight.
So the idea, it's two-pronged. One is public charging infrastructure, as in fast chargers, because those are those are more difficult to site because they're more expensive. There are a number of programs, and Dory could provide you with much more information on how specifically they've reached out to, I think it was minority-owned EV charging companies that actually focus on multifamily homes to provide infrastructure there. So we want to support both of those, but there's a need for both. And certainly it's a lot more challenging to put in chargers in multifamily homes than in single family homes. The city does have,
I'm sorry, that was
Yeah,
just
yeah,
our timer.
yeah.
Go right ahead, finish your sentence.
The city has made a lot of progress on policy supporting single family homeowner charging, like curbside charging, which was really exciting. I'm actually a user of that, but we haven't really made the same kind of progress on multifamily homes. And that's
Right, yeah, just to clarify, I'm just thinking in terms of general geographic location, having some stations closer to lots of multifamily buildings.
Absolutely right. And actually, with the previous federal grant programs, there was the area in New Hampshire and University Boulevard were actually in areas that would have been eligible for federal funding. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, please. Thank you so much. Councilmember Hanzak, do you have a question? A question.
Yes.
Question.
Hoping we're still going on tour. Yes, of the multifamilies. That never happened, I think. Yeah.
Oh, the multifamily waste tour. That's right.
We had talked about going on a tour. Yes, is that anyway? Just I'm reflagging that.
Yeah,
hoping that's still going to happen. And now my question or my comment, I would like to urge you to look at cost savings on the for your climate mitigation, as you highlighted in some of your food waste work, and that would include EVs for multifamily households, but also I'm thinking more positively now about the potential and worrying less about rat infestations and rodent infestations based on what you're describing, because I think maybe you could sell this to building managers based on cost reductions if we could demonstrate that through getting people to use these and less food waste going into like bins that go down the middle, and maybe that would actually reduce the number of infestations of rats and rodents. So just want to say that out loud because it seems exciting to me.
It's a really good point. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. And so we're going to take a 10-minute break to allow for some tech adjustments to happen at the dais. We will reconvene at 9:11. Thank you.
I was thinking, I know how it started.
Well, no. I mean, they thought you were. They announced someone.
No, that was the question.
No, it's not.
Okay.
No. Or that's a lot better. Yes. I think that, okay, cool, thank you. Oh, I was trying to find the list of sidewalk traffic calming ones. So, but I'm assuming I'll find it. I did. Yeah, it was good. It was fun. Yeah. Yeah, they just do all these. You weren't there for the. It was like.
I actually upstairs. So
Okay. Well, yeah.
quiet.
Absolutely.
I would have loved to have stayed.
It was fun. We had to listen to these recordings where they, like what it would sound like for dispatcher, and you had to like jot down the notes on what the person said, and then military alphabet, and translate that. So it was kind of interesting. It was hard. It was really hard. Yeah, and then talking about the 12-hour shifts and overnight. Oh my gosh, yeah, it sounded intense. Yeah, please. Cool.
Check this other one. It is connected. Let's turn it on.
Can you try to send it again?
It's not coming. Nothing coming.
It's coming here. Maybe we got to send it again. The touch panel. Maybe
Yeah?
because what's connected to the router? That one. Hey Kurt, how you doing?
Got your Ravens key? Yes, fine.
Sorry,
No, it was worse. It was doing good than it went out.
Yes. Yeah, I announced on the podcast the week before the. Oh yeah, and that happened. So Kurt, his was working in the beginning.
All of them were working. It's trouble.
So it's got to be the hub.
Yeah. Plug it in. So we can put it for the mayor? No, the mayor. No. Yeah, it's just the other one. For these guys here? No. They don't have one? That one too? No, for the.
Try to catch them now. See her. She's not in this in case she has.
I'll just leave it here.
Okay, but there's a couple. I mean, Ross will that.
Yeah, this would be for these two.
Okay.
Do you need to see them now?
No, I don't. I'm fine.
Yeah, we're gonna try to get one for Bob and maybe they could share. The mayor and
Yeah, I think they can probably share. But that's on. That's on.
test. Test. One, monitor 2, monitor 3.
Yeah, give it a little extra something so they don't feel so sad. Yeah, I think also, I was gonna say, I think the environment right now also, that they're encountering when they're hearing all of us complaining about the national situation and having lived through the pandemic lockdowns and everything, it's just, I feel like they must be living through a lot of stress and anxiety,
Kids.
Yeah.
How old are they now?
Well, they're 8, 14, and 18. At all those different stages. Like, I'm reminded that my 18-year-old, my 14-year-old, during most of their conscious lives, Trump has been the president most of the time. Just for example, and they had COVID lockdowns in between, right? Like, how awful is that? Like, what a childhood, right? And so I was like, I need to bring joy there. Yeah, no, and I mean, that's why I ran for this office, is because the day that my children made me process that, I was like, oh my God, and they sort of made some kind of really, maybe it wasn't a joke for them, but it felt like a joke for me that that Trump is the only kind of leadership they've really seen, and I was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh my God, I have to show you that ethical leadership is possible. No, all the adults in your life are not horrible, amoral, evil humans. Yeah. I don't know what I walked in on.
Okay, sounds like it. Thank you all for your patience. We're going to continue with our meeting this evening. I want to again send my sincerest appreciation to the Sustainable Maryland Committee as they just presented on their annual work plan. The next item is the library construction project update, and we are joined at the dais by our director for the library, Jessica Jones.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're back with another quarterly update for the Library and Community Center redevelopment project tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in. So we do refer to this project as the Library and Community Center redevelopment project because, as you can see here on the floor plan, it's a lot bigger than just the library. This project also encompasses the computer center, the Mac lab, the recreation staff area, the public restrooms here on the second floor, near the main reception desk, the senior room, and a new lounge area. So once completed, which is coming up and it's very exciting, we will have a new community anchor facility for residents to enjoy, whether as library patrons or as residents enjoying a host of other services that the city provides across our demography. The updated infrastructure also benefits residents who do not directly visit the facilities, in particular with stormwater infrastructure, which will provide better drainage to the surrounding neighborhood. We're also seeking LEED Gold certification, and the resulting green energy improvements contribute to a greater movement for more renewable energy and sustainable living. So this slide is starting to get crowded because there's so much to cover, but some highlights from the work completed between the December update to council and now are the reopening of the Maple Avenue pedestrian bridge and building entrance. The final grading was installed over the Maple Avenue trench. The furnishings RFP was executed. We're very close to a decision on the supplier. Stormwater pipes are nearly all installed. The sewer main relocation is nearly complete. Nearly all drywall is mounted. There's been painting with a primer coat, and countertops are being installed, ceiling tiles being dropped, and data and control system cabling is in process. Since the last update on the trees that were removed from the site at the commencement of construction, we have met with Tree Incarnation to make arrangements for the furniture that's going to be made from the reclaimed materials. We did emphasize the need for very durable furnishings that highlight the really beautiful grain that they have displayed that will last through many years of daily use by Tacoma Park residents and our neighbors. So we've covered the tangibles, and we'll go ahead and get into some of the financials. We've spent about 62% of the total available funds to date. Funding is comprised of the municipal bond, grants, ARPA funds, and bond interest. Despite being near the end of this project, staff have never stopped looking for additional sources of revenue, and we'll keep doing that until the project is completed. We want to do all due diligence there. The table here shows the state of the contingency funds, and there's still about $234,000 available in the contingency funds after an addition of ARPA funds. There's not a lot of time left in the project. There's still some variable costs. We plan kind of on the high side of that just to make sure that we come in under budget. The bids on the furnishings in particular actually all came in under what we had budgeted for on the very high side. So there's still contingency funding that may be in play, but we're moving forward with completing the project. And I have some more information about the contingency on the next slide as well. The original project contingency was 5% of the contract value with our general contractor, Doyle Construction. Projects of this type and size usually include a contingency of 5 to 10%, which is earmarked for unforeseen conditions. And as seen in the previous slide, the current value of change orders is about $1.58 million. These items here on the slide are the largest contributors. Permit changes from the Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services resulted in substantial increases, primarily with the transformer relocation and floodplain revisions, and they represent the largest portion of the contingency funds utilized. Another significant factor was the delay in the full notice to proceed, which was due to the permitting holdups. Unforeseen conditions are still a significant percentage, but they are well within the original contingency amount that is intended to address those unforeseen conditions. Our current short-term timeline is here, and really in this final stretch, it's all feeling much more short-term. But we'll be completing the utility work, the large stormwater line, and the WSSE sewer main relocation near Philadelphia Avenue. We're also going to be completing the roof and clear story external detailing, closing in the drywall finishes and the final painting, completing floor leveling and flooring installation with carpet and tile, cabinetry installation, final finishes in the public restrooms, HVAC system installation and safety system tie-in, and then also the new interior glass and door installations. So once construction is substantially completed, which is scheduled for mid-May, then the final tasks before reopening can begin. And that includes relocation of the library and relevant recreation department equipment and services, some final networking configurations, which are going to be done in-house by IT, our in-house IT, to save costs and because they're also very good at their jobs. Probably some shifting of the collection of 56,000 books that we're going to be bringing back over, which honestly is a pretty monumental undertaking all on its own, and then welcoming the public back in. The lease for the interim facility on New Hampshire Avenue is set to expire at the end of September after the relocation is completed. Throughout the project, city staff have engaged in all due diligence to minimize adverse impacts on our residents. We've coordinated with schools and provided service continuity at the community center with administration, housing and community development, finance, IT, and our main reception desk. Those functions are expected to continue throughout the relocation process and reopening process, with the exception of another temporary closure of the library to get everything moved and situated. And this is just a reminder that parking is limited around the site. Normal work hours for our general contractor run 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Please consider walking or using public transit at all times, but especially now with these limitations. And that concludes our presentation. We can take some questions.
Great, thank you so much. And I am so excited. I love drywall being primed. That just makes me feel good. Makes me feel really good. Is it possible for us to go back to, and I apologize, I meant to send this before the meeting, but then I see that the numbers are different from the version that was posted before.
Yes.
Slide 6, where we're walking through the contingency and the fact that they're somewhat different. So
yes,
I just want to confirm the changes, and just making sure that if it was just, hey, it was just a typo, we realized we actually had more ARPA dollars than we had originally put in this spreadsheet, or if there's something that has actually changed, which is resulting in us having $234,000 for the contingency.
Yes. That was, yes, we had missed a figure on the original submission, but
Okay.
those had been approved already.
Okay. So what we just want to make sure, and I apologize that I'm trying to eat 2 minutes while facilitating the meeting and watch the time. So what this table shows is, as of right now, between the municipal bond interest, which will be something that'll be discussed as part of the work session coming up with the budget amendment.
Yes.
And the amount of ARPA funds that were already allocated towards the library, we are looking at still having $234,000 in contingencies, and I just want, in a contingency fund, and I just want to make sure, when will we get out of the ground so that we are in a better place to know about the bedrock and the costs, the extent of those costs? Because even though we have we have 234K, I'm just rounding, in the contingency, the unforeseen conditions, I guess, or perhaps until we finish the project, is there a possibility that we could potentially go beyond this contingency?
Never want to say never.
Okay.
So the good news is the stormwater line is 90-something% complete. We have a connection at a manhole that State Highway still has to agree to. Our engineering partners have given an approved plan for it. The state just has to say it's okay because it's part of their right of way. So that is underground and still sitting out there. Worst case scenario, they require us to do a new precast. We have some time delay there. That'll be the biggest impact. The sewer line, I'm told, is completed, and the as-built are going to WSSC for approval. So until I get shining smiles back from WSSC, I'm not going to publish that it's good, set, and done. So I have no concerns there. The big concern is we have some subgrade drainage that we need to do still, and that will be some bedrock work. It's not an enormous portion of the job site, but it still exists. I think we have it captured in a change order. The change order has not fully gone through and been fully approved, and so you don't see it reflected in these figures yet.
Okay.
So we have a strong understanding of what to expect, but we found enough bedrock in this project so far that I know not to say until I actually have the final 2 pipes in the ground that were out of the ground. The other fantastic news is that we have finished the foundation. We, I think, have finished the waterproofing. It'll depend on the weather impacts from this week, whether or not we get our full commercial glazing back in. But for the most part, primarily the project is out of the ground. So there's just a couple things left to go that I can't guarantee. So.
Okay. And that's really helpful. Thank you for that. I was celebrating drywall. I should be celebrating when we no longer have to talk about bedrock.
Very exciting.
It's all exciting. I take it all as something that's I'm super excited about.
Mayor, there's one other thing that council should be aware of. As Mr. Chamberlain just alluded to, the calculation for the remaining funds does not take into account pending change orders. So those change orders that are being reviewed by our construction manager. We have received another change order related to the notice to proceed, the delay in notice to proceed. We had received it before. It was previously denied due to a lack of documentation. And so our construction manager is again reviewing it because it's been resubmitted by the contractor. It may be substantial, and so that may significantly reduce the amount of contingency funds that we have to. We won't know. Like I said, it's a lot of information. Construction manager will probably take another week or two to review. So if we hit a hurdle, we may need to come back to council.
Okay. But as of again, you just sucked all the joy.
See, I came in thinking we were $24,000 short, so I'm happy.
So so we have this amount that's in the contingency and what we see here. So this total of current change order, this is just those totals to date, not including change orders that you have those are just the approved, not the ones that have not been approved just yet. Okay, and you don't know exactly what those totals will be until that gets resolved, and then you would have to come back to us. One point that I do just want to make sure for the interest of our newer council members is just drawing attention to the funding sources, because I know that there's been quite a bit of concern about the impact of the library on taxpayer dollars, and I do just want to remind my colleagues of that second bullet where a little over 20% of the funds for the library came from the grant. About 31% came from ARPA funds, which are not taxpayer dollars. The bond interest, again, that's just interest from our municipal bonds sitting in the bank, about 3 to 4%. Again, not taxpayer dollars. The only amount of monies that ultimately came and we are obligated to pay back are from the municipal bonds. That's the 7 million that we originally took out or borrowed for this project. So I do just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that, because in a number of cases, those grants, kind of going back to the conversation with ANCCOT, those grants are bonds, but they're the bonds that we get from D20, not adding, which are grants, not necessarily adding to the municipal bond loan that we took out of $7 million.
Mayor, if I could just add
Sure.
one other thing, just because as you stated, we will talk about it when we present the third budget amendment. The $600,000 in municipal bond interest, you will see that in the third amendment, because we need to acknowledge the expense. In FY25, during the process and at the end of the process, when the budget was approved, that $600,000 was in the budget, highlighted as a transfer from the general fund to a library reserve fund. We did not at the time acknowledge the expense. And so what you see in the budget amendment is the acknowledgement of the expense, not a request for additional funds.
Okay.
And then the other thing that I want to note is that, Deputy City Manager Andrew Bolduc spoke to this, I think a couple weeks ago, at the end of the calendar year, calendar year 2024, we had some changes in ARPA usage where we thought we were going to be able to expend and apply a certain number of dollars, but at the very end of the year, we realized that they weren't going to be applied. And so rather than lose those dollars, we ended up having to switch the usage. And so another thing that you'll see in the budget amendment is $258,000 of a transfer from ARPA to the library. And again, it's ARPA money that we couldn't expend.
Great. Thank you so much. Any Councilmember Slagle?
This is just, thank you, great presentation. One quick question on the unforeseen conditions, the structural steel modifications. Maybe Mr. Chamberlain or Ms. Jones, if you could just explain what were the modifications and how did they come up? I'm on the slide 7.
I think we're up with it. The structural steel modifications were a failure from the first subcontractor for the steel on the site. And they failed to take fully into account how the new structure ties to our existing building. We can't just have the two hanging out in space near each other. We have to actually weave them together. So it's not an enormous amount of that 275, but it's noteworthy. So
thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Hanzak?
Can I just have clarity on whether or not, I'm sorry because I don't remember well, with the DPS permit changes, didn't you reach out to ask if we were able to get some reimbursement on that from, am I misremembering? I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to look that up.
We did meet with them. I asked for their team to come in and meet with ours, and this was after the delays that occurred. They were not suggesting that they could reimburse us. That wasn't really part of the conversation. This was more about going forward and lessons learned for them, working better with us and other municipalities in the future. They were about that time under new leadership. So he was, their new director was very willing to come meet with us and listen. I can't speak to what the relationship with DPS was prior to my arrival, but I know that staff struggled mightily to calendar. Time costs money for a substantial period of time, and I think there was some acknowledgement by some who were there that, yeah, okay, they could have done better, but not really an acknowledgement that they were
Thank you. I'm
And
sorry to throw that
I
at
do
you.
just want to clarify. So there was a couple of things at play, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong. So there was the DPS permit changes where they actually asked us to move things, which required monies, which they said, too bad, too sad. You had to move them, and the costs associated with the delays associated with getting the permitting. Again, too bad, too sad. We'll do better in the future. But there was a request that we put in to the county executive to make sure that we were not charged the transportation impact fee, which was about, I want to say, just about $100,000 or such. And I do recall that we received that approval.
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. So, so there were a couple of things that were at play in terms of what we could try to recoup from the county in terms of and just to kind of help newer members of council know. And there's been some, you know, if you attended certain events, you may hear of residents talking about impact fees and can we get a fee if someone develops this or that or the third. So because we don't do as a city our own zoning, the county does it, and we're not excused because we're a municipality and we're building something. We still have to go through the permitting process. We still have to deal with any zoning changes or any kind of requirements associated with construction. Those fees or the impact fees, the county charges any developer, right? And so in this case, we were being charged a transportation fee, which we were able to fight in saying, we're not adding any extra cars, we're not adding any extra parking spaces, therefore there should be no transportation impact, right? And if I'm calling that traffic impact, I don't know what it's called, but it's something related to cars. So I do think that that's just something important for all of us to kind of keep in mind in terms of the dynamic of when you have these types of projects and the role of the county versus what we have complete autonomy over. Councilmember Dabala.
To this topic, is there any potential reason to make another run at asking the county to reimburse some of this?
I will.
It's right. A couple of really large numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the staff have done
Yeah.
extensive work to try to educate and communicate to county staff regarding the impact of the permitting on this particular project. It is included multiple meetings, lots of documentation. I will be fully transparent in saying, in light of what the county's current budget outlook is right now, the likelihood of us trying to go to them again to try to get some sort of, some sort of reimbursement for this, it's just a futile exercise. I think where we are right now, and I've had conversations with the county exec, and I think that the county council, everyone is fully aware of the problems that were happening in terms of delays in permitting. It's not a big secret. Everyone knows it. And they've been doing, my understanding is the county has been doing a lot in terms of, bringing on new staff and really trying to fix the issue. So I would say at this point, we're at a place where our goal should be to bring this project to completion and hopefully stay as close as we can to the contingency funds that we have available now in order to make sure we're able to keep this thing on budget.
I would agree with that, Madam Mayor, and also what complicates the picture is that there were delays interwoven into all of this with utilities, EPCO, WSSC. It was a lot of that was intertwined, and trying to pull all that apart. Who was responsible for this piece of the delay? Who was responsible for that piece of the delay? Probably an impossible task.
Thank you, and thank you for all your work on this aspect of it. I know it's been frustrating.
May I just echo? I just want to echo the thanks. I looked back at my notes to see why I had that thought in my head, and I have here that a letter was sent by the mayor to the county executive, and you also did a lot of legwork. So thank you for trying so hard. I know we can't win every battle, but I appreciate the extreme efforts that both of you have gone to try to leverage more money.
Councilmember Lamon?
This is a question that is upbeat and cheerful after the budget questions that we were just asking. In the drawings of the finished library, we see a green open lawn essentially in the front, where at one time there were two huge trees that we will now be able to enjoy as tables, etc. But is that actually what the landscaping is intended to look like? Because it doesn't look very ecologically advanced, and it has no shade trees on it.
I think Ian may be able to elaborate a little bit more on this. I don't remember quite all of the details, but there is quite a bit of landscaping that's going to come in, including some trees that we expect to grow fairly quickly this time, installed far enough away from the building to stay away from the utilities. But yeah, did I miss? What did I miss?
So
There's what?
So we are required to do stormwater treatment on site, and that stormwater treatment is a wet pond. So within 24 hours after a rain event, water comes up, floods the space, sits there, seeps back in, and then slowly gets pulled off the site. So we'll have both and our vegetation maintenance folks can speak to this better than I can.
Get closer to the mic, please.
Sure. So we'll have a stormwater facility on the site, which will be planted with our normal native plantings. So those are both drought and flood tolerant because of the nature of where they're planted. In terms of the rest of the site, I don't know that there's a terrific volume of landscaping, but I'd have to look closer. I've been absolutely in the weeds in terms of the concrete and mud. Not so much. That's future Ian's problem, but we're actually getting pretty close to that. So I can look into that and get back with answers.
Yeah.
But no, we're not typically fans of giant lawns.
You're not typically what?
Fans of giant lawns.
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
That's why the illustration
Native plantings and
made me wonder.
that type of stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, same. It's been a little while since I've actually looked at that part. I'm excited to revisit it actually.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Not seeing any additional questions. Thank you all so much for keeping this moving, and the end is near. The end is near. So thank you all so much. All right. We are going to move to our voting session. The item on the for the voting session for tonight is the consent agenda. Just as a reminder, items on the consent agenda are voted on as one motion without discussion unless a council member requests an item be removed for individual discussion and or vote. Would someone like to move the consent agenda? Councilmember Honzak moved, Councilmember Landman seconded. Any points of discussion regarding the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. We could just do a okay. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Do we have any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, excellent. So the consent agenda passes, and we're going to move into our work session. The first item is the budget amendment number 3. And I'll turn things over to Director Chung and our city management team.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Tonight I'm going to give a summary of our third budget amendment. On May 15, 2024, the City Council adopted the fiscal year 2025 budget, followed by the approval of the Budget Amendment 1 on July 31st, 2024, and the second budget amendment on October 30th, 2024. Due to some unforeseen operational needs and expenditure, this is the third budget amendment for fiscal year 2025. And the third budget amendment includes the following adjustment. And there are three funds, three separate funds that is being affected by this budget amendment. In the general fund, the total adjustment is about $865,107. In the police department, the police protection grant revenue, there's a reduction of $85,047. And there is also an increase of $12,500 for police officer training expenses. And there is an increase of $17,646 for the street light upgrades, an increase of $137,317 for the HVAC control system, and this is funded by Equipment Replacement Reserve, an increase of $12,597 for the curtain installation in the gym, and this is funded by the Facility Maintenance Reserve. And then there is also an increase of $600,000 to allow for the use of the bond interest contingency funds to provide additional funding for the ongoing library construction project. The contribution to the contingency reserve was approved in the FY25 adopted budget, and is in the budget at a glance in the FY25 adopted budget. So this is the general fund adjustment. The second is the special revenue fund adjustment. The net total impact is zero, because there's a new grant awarded for the Maryland State Art Council, $7,400. The increase in both revenue and expenditure, so net zero. And there is a reduction of $29,437 revenue and expenditure of Washington McLaughlin School due to the grant closure and money recaptured by the state. So there is, again, the reduction of both revenue and expenditure in the same amount. And in the third fund that we have, the budget amendment is the in the ARPA fund. Budget expenditure reduction of $258,217 in the equipment replacement expenditure in the ARPA fund. And that includes the HVAC system, emergency generator, crack filling machine, street lights, due to the project delays unable to obligate funds by the reporting period. So this $258,000 is not used and is being transferred to the library construction account in the ARPA fund to reallocate fund from the above equipment replacement expenditure for the library construction project. So it's a internal fund transfer in the ARPA fund for that $258,000. Okay. So by looking at the last page of our cover memo, we included a table summarizing the balance and the percentage change in the unassigned reserve, along with this estimated general fund balance following the first, second, and third budget amendment. At the time of the adopted budget, the general fund balance was $12.6 million. After the third budget amendment, the projected balance is $10.8 million. This decrease is due to $20,000 budget increase in the first budget amendment, $892,000 cost reallocation from ARPA to the general fund in the second budget amendment. And 865,000 increase in expenditure in the third budget amendment. As a result, the ratio of the unassigned reserve has declined from 16.9% at the beginning of the year to 11.2%. Now, I'm happy to answer any question regarding the third budget amendment.
Thank you so much, Director Chung. Okay, now I'm going to do something that you know I always do whenever we start talking about moving stuff related to the library. Okay, I will be so glad when we are done with having to move things around because we are paying out the money now for the library. So just want to make sure that I'm clear. So for the because all of this for the most part is the capital outlay. So for the capital outlays for this budget amendment, the 767,000. So most of this is the library construction expenditure that is related to the ability for us to spend the bond interest.
Correct.
Okay. Now, when I first saw this, I said, well, where is the interest? Is this in the reserve? Like, I would assume that the interest would be in a account somewhere, and we're just spending what's already there.
Yeah. Every year we receive interest from the bond council when we were paying for the bond, okay? And the interest that we receive is putting into the unassigned reserve. Okay, and once we realized that that interest can be used, we did a budget adopted in last year for the contribution of this interest into the contingency library reserve, which is a separate reserve we set up for the use of the library construction project.
Okay, and that kind of goes to another thing, because that's another reason why I sometimes get a little confused, and bear with me, colleagues, in terms of the library reserve and where those funds are, and then the general fund reserve. Are those combined, or they truly separate reserves?
The unassigned reserve is independent from the library bond reserve and also the library contingency reserve. We have two different reserves set up. The bond reserve is where we place our $7 million in there. And right now, that bond reserve in fiscal year 2025, I believe we have only 1.1 million left.
Okay.
And then at the end of 2025, all these bond money will be depleted. And this 600,000 is generated from the interest that we earn from the bond, okay? And that's originally in the unassigned reserve. And because of the adopted budget in 2025, we transferred the 600,000 interest we earn from the unassigned reserve to the library contingency reserve, which is a separate reserve from the bond reserve.
Okay. And so I just want to make sure, because, you know, we're always dealing with the challenge, particularly because of the library and the fact that you have some monies that are in the library bond reserve, and then you have these other components that are a part of the library unassigned reserve, and then you have the fund balance, like our general fund reserve and the fund balance. So for example, right now it is showing in large part because of this movement of monies for the library construction, that we are our reserve balance is 11.17%, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that this is indeed what our general fund balance, what our unassigned reserve ratio is, or whether or not there's some monies in these other library related reserves that ultimately feed into this at all, or is it no, this is exactly where we are in terms of our budget, where we've basically gone over budget 3.2 million, and it's not some of those funds are in our library reserves that are in under different buckets, not in a part of the general reserve, general fund. Am I making sense?
So this is actually a budget.
Okay.
So this is an estimate of how much we will actually spend.
Okay.
How much we actually spend will determine our final year-end closing. So we really don't know how much money that we'll be spending at the end of the year, especially with different department operating costs, the CIP projects, whether they're going to be completely completed by the end of fiscal year 25. The actual number is unknown at this time, but these number here that we just displayed is the estimated budget ending balance.
Okay. And that's if assuming every single thing that we have in the budget gets spent to the full capacity, and then that's where we would be.
Correct.
And then in terms of, I could just be confusing myself because it's late. In terms of the library reserves, that isn't accounted for, isn't relevant for this case here, correct?
Yes, the library reserve and also the contingency reserve will definitely be gone by fiscal year 25. Because as you can see from the previous presentation, we're still about 250 some thousand shy from our from our total available balance for the library project.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, it was saying that we have a contingency of 200 and I want to say that was what, 260,000. So there's money there, and it may not be enough, right? But what we just saw was that there's contingency funds available. And I think what I'm just trying to make sure of, because I get tripped up every single time, and I know it's me, that as we are spending money as we are actually spending for the library construction, it moves into the general fund, which starts to show that we have all of these expenditures that are happening because we have to burn it in the general fund. But then just trying to make sure that I understand how these other reserves that relates to where the bond money is for the library fits into that is the piece that I'm always trying to just make sure I have straight in my head, if that makes sense at all.
I would be very clear. The library bond reserve and also the library contingency reserve for that 600,000 will be gone. Okay. But the unassigned reserve, how much will be exactly, how much we will have exactly at the end of the fiscal year to 25 is not sure yet. Number that I just provided for 11.17% is really an estimate.
Okay. That's helpful, and I love how you keep stressing it will be gone, so it doesn't matter. Like at the end of this fiscal year, you don't have to worry about it because you don't have the money to spend.
No.
So if we're assuming that we spend everything, including the bond, the remainder of the bond, which we're on target to do, this is what our final reserve calculation would be, and it would be that we would have a balance.
Yes, correct.
A ratio of 11.17%. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. I think Councilmember Slagle was first.
We may all be asking similar questions. Thank you very much for clarifying this, and understanding the accounting is very helpful. I guess I had one kind of legal clarification, which is because we're committed to a 17% unassigned reserve, I should know this answer. We are okay to spend beyond that in this fiscal year, so long as we replenish it in our budget for FY '26. Is that correct? I probably should just asking an open-ended question. What does it mean that we're dropping to 11.2% in the unassigned reserve?
Is the meaning is after this third budget amendment, we estimate our unassigned reserve to be at a level of 11.17%. If everything that we talk about on the first budget amendment, second budget amendment, third budget amendment, everything we talk about is spent, then this will be our ending balance, about 11% and 11.17% left in our unassigned reserve. It is not our policy to go beyond the 17%, but we have to obligate. We have to obligate with this expenditure, especially with the library. Yeah, so.
And it is a policy now.
Yeah.
And so we have the discretion to utilize those funds as we see fit throughout the course of the year.
I see. Thank you. I also, a related question was regarding the ARPA fund transfer, moving monies in 258,217 from the equipment replacement reserve.
This is different from the reserve from the general fund. This is an expenditure account that is created in the ARPA fund for the equipment replacement expenditure. Okay. So it's completely different from our reserve, which we set up in the general fund. This is completely in ARPA fund.
Okay, so my question, that's helpful, thank you. And my question is, how does this set us back in our equipment replacement plan to have moved that money that was allocated for equipment replacement now to the library project?
Well, you can see that some of the money that we actually move out from the ARPA is putting into the general fund, because you can see the HVAC control system now is being charged to the general fund equipment replacement reserve. The amount in the general fund adjustment, $865,107, include the HVAC control system expenditure. And this is funded by the equipment replacement reserve in the general fund now.
We weren't going to use ERR dollars to purchase ERR equipment, and now we have to. So it is now a reduction from the ERR.
Which is the reduction? What is the reduction from the ERR?
$258,000 is a reduction from the ERR in order to allow for ERR purchases. So those are the transfers that are noted in the ARPA section. So Director Chung had just mentioned that we are utilizing the general fund to fund the ERR purchases that we are no longer using ARPA dollars for. So that $258,000 were ARPA dollars that we're going to use to purchase ERR equipment. Mm-hmm. Now we have to, because those funds are not going to be available anymore, we now have to use general fund dollars. Those general fund dollars are the ERR.
And had we, back in October 30th, was that when you moved an equivalent amount, 258,000, into the ERR, knowing that this was coming?
We transferred the source of the funds for equipment purchases that would have otherwise been in the ERR.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Landman.
Thank you. I have one question about the reserve and another question about one of the elements on the that you discussed. So to understand how, this is a significant number, a significant differential between the desired 17% and the number of 11% in the unassigned reserve. When you calculate this number, does it also take into consideration whatever other changes there may have been along the way in the course of the last quarter, having to do with expenditures that are normal expenditures for our staff, if we've had vacancies that were not foreseen when the budget was started at the beginning of the year? Or is it potentially true that this number is less dire because there are unspent funds that would have otherwise gone to salaries and benefits that would not necessarily be revealed from the calculations here.
So this ending balance here showing the $3.4 million in our unassigned reserve. Again, this is an estimate based on our adopted budget of 25, subtracting the first budget amendment, assuming that we're going to use that money, subtracting the second budget amendment, assuming that we're going to completely use all those money, and subtracting this third budget amendment, assuming that we are going to use everything. So this will be the ending balance, an estimated balance, and it's an estimated balance in the budget. It is not the actual balance at the end of the year, because a lot of actual expenditures are not known at this time, because still we are in the beginning of March, and we still have April, May, June, and July, to go through. And even after June, we're still making payments for our payables, and we're still collecting the revenue from the county. So there's no way that I can estimate what is the actual balance would be, okay? But but with this with this last table here, it's showing us that with all three budget amendments, assuming everything is spent, that will be the ending balance in our unassigned reserve.
If I could build a little bit on Susan's response, which she said is accurate, but I want to zoom in a little bit more on your question. I think was about, we budget for 100% of the expense of all positions,
right?
Wages, benefits, and so forth. In reality, we don't always have those positions filled. Matter of fact, we've had some that have been unfilled and continue to be unfilled during the course of the year, and that non-expenditure is not factored into the estimate.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's not factored into the estimate.
So the changes
Susan
here
is referring
only
to.
reflect the amendments to the budget and not the actual rate of expenditure in the first column under the adopted.
Yeah, I think the estimate envisions full expenditure of all allocated funds in the current fiscal year.
Thank you. That clarifies it.
And if we have projects that haven't been done, things that haven't been purchased, stuff that costs less, positions that haven't been filled, that's all things that aren't accounted for in that model that says, hey, we budgeted for this, so, what's reflecting this 11% doesn't reflect those non-expenditures.
Okay, because I recall at the end of last year when we had the report from our
The auditor?
that there was a substantial carryover. I'm only inquiring about this because that differential looks maybe more concerning than it actually is. And you're nodding like I kind of have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Now,
That's just to chime in, Councilmember Lamon. You're absolutely correct. What we typically see as part of the budget amendment process works under the assumption that we are spending everything in the budget and we're just amending along the way. Usually we don't get a better picture of what was left and not completed until the first budget amendment for the next fiscal year's budget. And so that's why you'll often see. Now, sometimes, and we have asked in the past and have received it in the past from council, from staff, when we are working on budget reconciliations towards like near the end of the budget development process, staff sometimes can give us a window into where certain projects are and realistically what can move forward and what won't be able to move forward. But that's usually a part of the last budget amendment or as part of reconciliation.
okay. I have just one last question, and then I'll get off your agenda. So the description of what's going on with the relatively modest amount of money for the Washington McLaughlin School. Could you? I recall that there was a money set aside for some fixing up the building to prevent it being an attractive nuisance. And I don't understand what this is describing, because didn't we already obligate and spend that money, or is this something different?
We received from the state a net grant to assist Washington McLaughlin with some of the challenges that they were having resolving some of the issues on the property. And we've expended the majority of those funds, and we have no more obligations to the property or to the owner. And so those funds have now been recaptured by the state.
So we weren't able to hang on to them for other NED projects because it was it was initially assigned to that one. Okay,
The NED grants are for a specific purpose. If that purpose ends, then you give that money back.
Right. And the building was secure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember DeBala, did you have a question, or was your question answered?
My question was answered.
Okay, Councilmember
Just
Honzak?
one question building on that. So it seems to me that because those reserve percentages appear to me over the last couple of years to have produced a quite extraordinary level of anxiety among residents in trying to grapple with the budget and what we're doing well and what we're not doing so well. And we are reporting on these quarterly. I wonder, this is a question for you, Director Chung, but also just for city management. How difficult, how much labor is it to just estimate that the year-to-date vacancy salary calculation as a part of this, when either as a part of the budget amendment to date or just as an estimate that would come in one of these tables, to get that contingency more to where we know it's more likely to be at least based just on the staffing, which is more clear cut. Well, we know which positions have been unfilled all the way up until to now. Is that, and you don't have, if you don't know the answer, I'm just kind of curious, is that a big calculation? Is that a super time consuming activity?
The actual calculation, it's kind of difficult to make because there are so many different vacancies right now, and it has to go through a major project for the HR department to calculate the actual amount of vacancy. But our financial consultant from Reftalis actually give us an estimate of how much salary savings could provide the city called execution rate. They are letting us know in general, our execution rate is about 94%, meaning that when we budget for $100, only $94 is being used. So some of it is because of this salary saving. 6% of it will not be used. So this is their estimate of how much saving we might get from the salary savings in the terms of
salary.
execution rate.
Just salary.
Yeah.
And that's based on how many years of data? Ish?
Well, they will. I think our deputy city manager, Andrew Bodak, had looked into the past several years, and he said the average salary saving could be up to 11%. So this is something that we need to verify with him.
Yeah, that's actually really, really helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we have Deputy City Manager Bodak has appeared.
Yeah. Good evening, folks. Yeah, just confirming what Director Chung stated. The consultant, uses that number of 6%, and that's been based on historic trends. In my own analysis of vacancies we've seen over the last couple of years, the city's been as high as 11%, which is a little bit of an outlier. If we look at the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, when they look at vacancy rates for municipalities, local, non-educational, those are a little bit closer to 5%. So I think the 6% number seems to be, conservative based on the city's trends, but still a little bit high based on what we're seeing in the national market. And it is something you'll see in the city manager's transmittal letter and in this upcoming budget, the way we're factoring that into our calculations. And I just to give you a little bit of a preview, we don't, when we build the budget, it's not necessarily a budget amendment. but we do project to the extent that we can. It is very challenging to project salary savings because, as Director Chung said, there are so many different factors, vacation buyouts and other things. And we are hopeful that when our HRIS system is online, that we'll be able to more accurately identify that. But when it's different than a budget amendment when we're projecting what's going to happen by the end of FY25 so that it helps us build FY26. And so in the proposed FY26 budget, we are projecting a fund balance above the 17% by the close of FY26. I just wanted to give that quick clarification.
I will also, thank you, Andrew. I will also add that you will note when you see the budget a bit of a different approach than traditionally done. I'm proposing use of an execution rate so that we're not requesting 100% with an assumption that there's 100% of every position filled and expense associated with salary and benefit for every position the city has 100% of the time during the whole fiscal year. So would like to, and that's part of what's being proposed, and ultimately Mayor and Council will make the decision whether our adoption of an execution rate as a methodology is something that you would like for us to incorporate in the adopted budget or not. But I am proposing, my staff and I have been thinking through how to maybe get a little more realistic with the numbers. We have some historical basis for that, as was mentioned, but I'd also say we want to be a tad conservative about that because of the good points that Andrew made with respect to when you have retirements or otherwise people are leaving and you've got to have cash outs of benefits and so forth. Sometimes an employee's been here a long time, that could be a considerable number, and those are normally paid from unexpended personnel funds. We have to have a little buffer for things like that. We have reclassifications and some other things that happen during the course of a year. And sometimes, when positions become vacant and you negotiate for a salary, you don't know precisely what that expense is going to be in the coming year. So, we'll be a little cautious about it, but you will see a new approach presented to you for your consideration.
Okay,
And the
thank you very
budget book
much.
is available now in the website.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Wonderful. Not seeing any additional questions. Thank you so much, Director Chung.
Thank you.
And we are moving to our last item, work session on the process for restricting parking at properties with limited frontage.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be brief. City of Tacoma Park staff recommending that the City Council consider an amendment to a section of the code, section 13.20.040, parking or standing prohibited areas, that would prohibit parking in front of the access walkway to a home whose lead walk extends to the curb and provides the only access to their home entrance. Once implemented, residents may contact the Public Works Department to have pavement markings applied to the roadway area where parking is prohibited. Restricted area would be marked to include the width of the access walkway, plus 1 foot on each side, and the city's police department will be responsible for enforcement. The code language that's included in your packet has been reviewed by both city staff and the city attorney. The code change would require, City Clerk, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's a 2 reading ordinance. And one thing that I didn't know, Ms. Carpenter, is when it would take effect.
Ordinances take effect 20 days after adoption unless you specify another time.
Right, and it is not specified, no other time is specified, so 20 days after your second reading is when this would take effect. Again, residents who have this circumstance in front of their homes would need to contact Public Works to have their sidewalk stripped, and that would enable the city police department to conduct enforcement. And I'm available to take any questions if there are.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala.
Yes, thank you. Two things. One for the rest of the council. You may recall that a Ward 2 resident came a couple months ago and talked about this very problem. Plus someone came tonight and a different someone came tonight and talked about it. And so this is responding to that issue that got raised. And I think it handles it quite well. We don't know exactly how many there are, and so the request process makes a great deal of sense to me. If it's a problem for someone, then we can deal with it. If it's not a problem, why go out and look for a whole bunch of properties and take a lot of staff time? The question that I had to do with letting residents know how, if this were to pass, then we would want to somehow let residents know of the change and allow for enough time before there becomes some enforcement issue, enforcement of it, right? So, first question, would we have what, a newsletter article and a blog and a couple other things like that, regular social media stuff, pushing this out maybe would be the way to do it. And
our intention was to include it on the city's website, to have a page for it, or probably in addition to an existing page. We could also do a blog. We had not contemplated including it in the newsletter, but we certainly could.
Yeah, just might take a little space. Just a thought. And then the effective date of the ordinance, when people could start asking, is 20 days, but the enforcement, just to be clear, would be of places that are marked.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to go back and correct myself. The law would apply regardless of whether or not you have the marking in front of your home.
Okay, then I would really think we'd want to have some outreach on this so people know that.
Sure.
Including the newsletter and whatever else might work, besides council members letting their constituents know is another way. But yeah, if it's going to be enforceable with or without the paint, then we really need to let people know. But I think this is great, and I really appreciate the staff work that went into the creative approach that you came up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Councilmember Honzak.
I've got about 4 questions, and I'll just list them off for whoever. So the first is, I'm curious if anybody knows if anything like this exists in the county. The second is how we landed on 5 feet. It seems like it might be good if we needed to get an emergency vehicle in or whatnot. My concern would be, and I just have no idea of the scale of the issue, if there's a lot of on-street parking in any area where this might be more prevalent, and I'm thinking of like the north end of Ward 5, for example. There's a whole bunch of on-street parking and a lot of these kinds of staircases where people might like to have this, and at the same time we just need to be mindful of how many people are relying on the on-street parking. And then I'm curious if Director Braithwaite, if you could explain what kind of marking you're envisioning. I would just like to imagine that and help our residents imagine that. And if you would be proactive, the final question is, would you be proactive about putting the marking out wherever you see these existing, or would you wait for them to be requested?
Yeah, first, the marking that we're proposing is the same that we do now for when people have a issue with people parking in front of their driveway. We just do 2 little L brackets. The code specifies that you can't park within 5 feet of a driveway. So at the 5-foot mark on either side of the driveway, we put a little L bracket on the road. With heat down thermoplastic, it lasts quite a long time and holds up well to changes in weather. So it doesn't have to be done, it can last for years. So we'd use that same approach. That's what we're envisioning, the marking on the pavement. We would not paint the curb. Curb painting does not last. It's something that as soon as you paint, you have to, it flakes, it chips. It's not a good way to mark, and people don't tend to look at the curb. So the white line, usually about 4 inches in thickness. And what we're envisioning is 1 foot on either side of the width of the lead walk or stairway.
1 foot on either side.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I see.
So most lead walks tend to be 3 feet. some might be 4, some might be more. But basically, the idea would be just that space at the lead walk and a foot on either side. It's not intended, you can't park there, so you wouldn't want emergency vehicle access. It's
I see.
strictly
Yeah, I was picturing
access. Yeah, it's just enabling someone to get into their lead walk if they live there.
And you would be proactive, or would you be reactive?
We don't intend to be
responsive?
proactive. People are very particular about what they want in front of their homes, and I would never put something down without a request.
Okay. And, but would people be ticketed if they parked there though, then, if we weren't proactive about?
Just as you can be now if you park in front of a driveway apron. If a resident who has that effect occur can call the police, the police tend to do a kind of courtesy notice or try to notify whoever the owner of the car is. But if it's a repeated situation, then they would ticket.
Okay, so have you at all considered doing an X in front of something so small, just because it sounds like this is not a county-wide
I haven't seen it
practice,
before.
or-
Yeah.
Okay, because I've seen, I don't know if they're part of what you guys are doing. I've seen a couple X's in our neighborhood, like white X's, where in fact, one of them is in front of one of these kinds of staircases where someone is handicapped. I don't know whether the city did that or whether the residents did, but
No,
it
no.
looks a little bit, I'll be honest, it looks more effective given that
Yeah.
people aren't aware that you're not supposed to park in front of, well, it's not the law right now, but
Yeah.
people wouldn't be aware of that, whereas driveways are more of a common occurrence around the country, around the state.
Sure.
I will just say, Councilmember Hanzak, that I have those driveway things near my in front of my house, and they work.
No, those I don't mean those
you-
are very effective, but I'm thinking because this is in front of a walkway, people might not be aware of the fact that that's a thing to pay attention to.
Well,
That's what
it
I'm
actually
thinking.
it forces people to view them more like, and I'm sorry, I'm an advocate because what you have with driveways is not necessarily someone parking directly behind your driveway. They tend to park too close to your
Yes,
driveway.
yes.
And so what that L bracket does is gives you a visual cue of something like a parking space. So
Yeah.
you're more inclined to not pass that line based on how they are.
I totally agree with you. I think though that my observation, and I'm just sharing this because this really happens a lot in our neighborhood. They've been great for driveways. They've been less great for nuanced things like this that are smaller spaces. Like for example, we have some challenges with people parking too close to the edge, as you know, near like Erie. And I think an X could be something that would be more important in those kinds of small, tight spaces like this.
Sure.
Like I see that it's working and where the neighbor has the handicapped access at the bottom. I mean, again, not sure if it was legal, but it's helping those people. So just something to consider about approach.
Yeah,
Anyway,
our
thank you.
intention with the L brackets, it's the minimal amount of thermoplastic
I understand.
that we believe will we haven't
Do
had
the
this in
job.
place, so we don't have an experience of seeing it work or not work. The more X's you get, then it just adds to the
Yeah,
time, adds to the
sure.
material, and whether or not it's needed. I guess we'll see
Yeah, we could
once
see.
we implement if the L brackets aren't doing it and people are finding violations, which the police could certainly help us note, then we can revisit that and come up with something else.
Thank you.
I haven't seen this anywhere else, so maybe
Yeah,
we have a
either.
unique situation with lead walks directly abutting and stairways directly abutting a curb without much right-of-way space or sidewalks. So.
Councilmember DeBallo.
Yeah, just very quickly, just to clarify, I think a few things I think I just heard. So, this is for a property that has a stairway that comes to the road. There's no sidewalk, and they don't have a driveway, because if they had a driveway, they had another way to get into their house.
It could also be a lead walk with no sidewalk.
Or a lead walk
Yeah.
with no sidewalk and no driveway. Just clarifying. Okay. And then it's enforceable with or without the thermo. And did I hear someone say that there might be a courtesy parking ticket and then repeat violators? If that's possible, that's a good idea.
I don't think anybody said that.
I
She
did.
say.
My
She did.
experience with the police is that they don't tend to ticket the first time they get a complaint and come out and find a car. In the way they're trying to find out who the owner of the car is based on the license plate.
Okay,
If they're
not a
local, they
courtesy
can.
ticket, but they
Yeah.
they try to find the person and let them know what the
our
rules
parking
are.
enforcement folks are not
They're good.
trying to issue tickets automatically.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to clarify.
They're
that.
trying to
Thank
solve
you.
the problem first, and then if they need to, they'll issue the ticket.
Thank you, Councilmember Schlegel.
Thank you. Just quickly, so yeah, thinking there's like Jackson Avenue, Circle Avenue. You can think of these places that were developed in a way where they cut down an embankment straight down to the curb when they built the house and they put the road in. So this makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking this through, and I'm concerned about the idea of just saying, well, if people request it, then they'll get it, because and how this could happen in practice would be, okay, I've never let's say I live in such a house, I've never requested this striping, and sometimes I park straight in front of my sidewalk for whatever reason, and then people on the street are like, you can park there, and then they get ticketed. Or one time I park there and I get ticketed in front of my own house. And so I'm thinking just roughly that we might be talking about a couple hundred properties all over the
I
city.
think much fewer than
Maybe
that.
even fewer than that, yeah. And
Much
so
fewer.
couldn't we simply do a visual survey with code enforcement and gradually identify them and fill them in? Because I think we're just headed for some headaches if it's not there, but then there's a law enforced. And in terms of having a website location, if a new owner comes into a house, they may have no idea that the ordinance exists, and that over a few years you could quickly have a lot of people who really were surprised that either they got a ticket or they had the option to have striping done.
I understand your concerns. I mean, I've worked for the city now for decades. This is the first time this has ever come up. So I'm not sure what triggered this to be a situation that wasn't raised before. So my sense is it's probably fairly limited in terms of those folks that are directly affected. And it's going to typically be those cases where you have a stairway with handrails right to the curb. And so if somebody parks in front of your stairway, you can't walk around, you can't get around their car. So it's a very specific, it's trying to address a very specific situation.
Thank you. Councilmember Landman.
I have no problem with this proposal. I think it makes a lot of sense. The only thing that that strikes me is that we work very hard on, and with you and your team, to change the sort of request-based system from being, somewhat like squeaky wheel based when it comes to traffic calming. And I therefore think that people who know coming in to request this and other people not having any clue that they can request the striping is somewhat problematic unless we do some kind of, public education, because it could lead to kind of a not particularly even-handed utilization of something that would make it much easier for people to get in and out of their houses. So maybe there would just be, if it really is a very small number, I think Councilmember Dybala mentioned we've heard from two people, and the one woman who spoke today, I'm afraid I don't recall her name, she said everyone on her block faces this problem. So at least one could, paper the people on that street and say, this is the new regulation that we're adopting, and this is the option that you have if we know where those places are or could identify them readily. I just think that would be consistent with the other change we've made to not be squeaky wheel based.
Sure. We aren't really prepared to have the staff time devoted to doing a citywide walk and identifying those locations. Maybe code enforcement has the time. We certainly don't at Public Works. So that was why we didn't take the approach of proactively identifying those locations.
Well, in my experience, code enforcement has memorized pretty much the addresses and locations of everything in the city.
Yeah.
So possibly that's something that they might be
They
able
may
to
already
help us
know.
with. And I certainly appreciate your point about not wanting to pay for the whole city. Yeah, thank you.
And I do think that this is where we come in terms of helping to spread the word and to working with our communications to make sure that folks are aware. Just as a reminder, I do want to echo Director Braithwaite's point of there are people who do not want it in front of their homes. I went through it with my street. I love it. My neighbor, not so much, did not want it, right? So we do have to keep in mind that there may be differences in opinion in terms of the value, but as long as we can do our due diligence to educate our respective wards, working with Ryan to make sure that we can kind of put something up to let people know that this is available. It's not just limited to this particular case, but if you also have a driveway that you're concerned about people parking a little too close to, this is something that you can take advantage of. So I do just want to, there are some lower hanging, less laborious approaches to this. And part of it could be, us helping to spread the word. Was there another 10 seconds? Okay. Go ahead, Councilmember
Just really
Gilbert.
quick to help everybody out with the ideas about the enforcement piece. Director Braithwaite was correct that the officers use discretion in regards to the driveway issue. Normally, we wait for a complaint. We used to wait for a complaint. I forget, I'm retired now. And then we go and we talk to the homeowner. And if it's, because sometimes it can be the homeowner blocking their own driveway. And that's something we tried to get away from before I left. So the homeowner would call and say that someone's parked there. The officer would check and make sure doesn't belong to the homeowner first.
Thank you.
And thank you. That was along the lines, because I'm thinking if someone who owns their home and they want to park there, again, I think they should be able to. So I wanted to see where that stood. So that's helpful.
Yeah, and typically, the police won't enforce unless they have a request to enforce. I mean, they're not actively going out to look for these situations where that occurs.
Councilmember Honzak?
I did just think of an issue though that may arise if in some of our 6-unit, 8-unit buildings. I can totally imagine a situation where you may have conflict within the building about people who want this on the curb and who don't, and it would only take one resident who says, I could give a flying hoot about whether or not you don't want me to park here and I want to park here. Would we then leave that to the discretion of the building owner to get it painted and to allow people to call in, I guess? I mean, that's just something for us to consider, because I could see where it could lead to more conflict.
We could conjecture on and on. My hunch would be that for a multi-unit building, they're going to have multiple points of access. There won't be one lead walk with a stairwell just at the curb.
I think, yeah, I'm not sure about that in a certain portion of Ward 5, but yeah. Anyway, I'll go take a look before we vote on this. Yeah.
All right. Okay, great. Seeing no more questions, thank you so much, Director Braithwaite and City Management team, for bringing this before us. This item will come back to the council, I believe, next week for a vote. And with that, we have completed the agenda for this evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you so much. A second? Thank you all so much. Have a great night.